There is something about growing up in America in the 1970s that stays with a person forever. The smell of freshly cut grass on summer evenings, the sound of screen doors slamming shut, the freedom of childhood before the world changed. If someone was lucky enough to be a kid during that decade, they understand something that cannot quite be explained to anyone who came after. This was a time when America was changing in ways nobody fully understood yet. Vietnam was ending. Nixon resigned on live television. Disco filled the airwaves while punk rock was being born in garages. The economy swung wildly between boom and bust. Gas lines stretched around city blocks. Somehow, in the middle of all that uncertainty, childhood felt simpler than it ever would again. This was the decade that gave us Star Wars, Atari, banana seat bikes, and summer nights catching fireflies until parents finally called everyone inside. The world was not yet connected by screens. Neighbors still knew each other's names. Kids disappeared after breakfast and returned at dinner, and nobody worried. Let's walk through what growing up in that era actually felt like. Some of this might bring back memories so vivid they hurt. Some of it might explain why people who lived it cannot stop talking about it. Let's step into that world. The American home in the 1970s had a look that is impossible to forget. Walk through the front door and the colors hit immediately. Harvest gold, avocado green, burnt orange. These were not accent colors. They were everywhere. The refrigerator was avocado. The shag carpeting was orange. The wood paneling on the walls was dark brown. And somehow it all worked together in a way that felt warm and inviting. Shag carpeting was so thick that small toys would disappear into it. Vacuuming was a serious workout. Kids would lie on that carpet watching television, feeling the deep fibers against their skin. The texture is something that still triggers memories decades later. The television was a piece of furniture, a massive wooden cabinet with a screen that seemed huge at 25 inches. There were maybe 7 channels, and someone had to get up and walk across the room to change them. The television guide came in the Sunday newspaper, and families would circle the shows they wanted to watch that week. Missing a program meant missing it forever. There was no recording, no streaming, no second chances. Saturday morning cartoons were sacred. Kids would wake up early, pour themselves a bowl of sugary cereal, and plant themselves in front of the television for hours. Scooby-Doo, the Super Friends. Schoolhouse Rock taught grammar and history through songs that people still remember word for word decades later. The kitchen was where families actually gathered. Dinner happened at a set time, and everyone was expected to be there. The meal was cooked from scratch most nights, though TV dinners in aluminum trays were a treat. The microwave had not yet become standard. Crock pots were revolutionary, allowing working mothers to start dinner in the morning. The telephone hung on the kitchen wall with a cord that stretched across the room. There was one phone for the entire family. Conversations were not private. Teenagers would stretch that curly cord as far as it would go, sometimes into the hallway closet, trying to talk to friends without parents hearing every word. The family car in the 1970s was enormous by today's standards. They had wide bench seats in front and in back. There were no seat belts in most back seats, and even when they existed, nobody used them. Kids would sprawl across the back seat, climb into the rear cargo area of station wagons, or squeeze into the front seat between parents. Station wagons with fake wood paneling on the sides were everywhere. The third row seat faced backward, and kids sitting there would wave at drivers following behind. Road trips meant hours of staring out windows, playing license plate games, and stopping at Howard Johnson's or Holiday Inn for the night. Then, the gas crisis hit in 1973, and everything changed. Suddenly, there were lines stretching for blocks just to fill up. There was odd even rationing based on license plates. The big American cars that got 10 miles per gallon became expensive burdens. Smaller Japanese cars started appearing, and the American auto industry would never be the same. Before we continue with the culture and experiences that define childhood in this era, if you are enjoying this look back at how Americans really lived and want to explore more decades and memories, consider subscribing. There are so many more stories about the world that shaped us. Growing up in the 1970s meant freedom that seems almost impossible now. Kids left the house after breakfast and did not come home until dinner. Parents had no way to reach them. No cell phones, no tracking apps. The rule was simple: be home when the street lights come on. Neighborhoods were playgrounds. Kids built forts in empty lots, played kick the can until dark, and rode bikes for miles without adult supervision. The banana seat bicycle with high handlebars was the vehicle of childhood freedom. Baseball cards attached to the spokes made a sound like a motor. Summer meant running through sprinklers, catching fireflies in mason jars, and the music of the ice cream truck coming down the street. The good humor man was a celebrity in every neighborhood. Kids would run inside for quarters, then chase the truck down the block. Playgrounds had metal equipment that got burning hot in the summer sun. The slide was steel and it would scorch bare legs. The merry-go-round spun fast enough to launch children off if they were not holding tight. The ground beneath was concrete or hard-packed dirt, not rubber padding. Kids got hurt sometimes. They got back up. School was different. Teachers had authority that was rarely questioned. The paddle was still used in many schools. Classes said the Pledge of Allegiance every morning. Lunch was served on divided trays, and everyone ate the same thing. There were no accommodations for preferences or dietary restrictions. Music defined the decade in ways that shaped a generation. The radio was constantly on, and the songs that played became the soundtrack of childhood. AM radio gave way to FM, and suddenly album-oriented rock meant hearing full songs, not just singles. Vinyl records were how music came home. Kids would save allowance money to buy albums, studying the cover art, reading every word on the sleeve, putting a record on the turntable, carefully placing the needle, and lying on the floor listening to the entire album from start to finish was a ritual. The music was everywhere. Disco dominated the mid-decade, and suddenly everyone was dancing. Rock continued to evolve. Soft rock filled the airwaves with songs that parents and children could share. 8-track players in cars meant road trips had soundtracks, even if the tape would switch tracks right in the middle of a song. The movies of the 1970s changed everything. Jaws made everyone afraid to swim in 1975. Star Wars in 1977 was not just a movie, but a phenomenon that children lived inside. The action figures, the lunchboxes, the t-shirts. Kids watched it multiple times in theaters because there was no other way to see it again. Going to the movies was an event. Theaters were grand, single-screen palaces with balconies and curtains. The smell of popcorn cooked with real butter filled the lobby. You sat in the dark with strangers, sharing an experience that everyone would talk about at school the next day. Shopping meant going to the mall or downtown department stores. Sears and JCPenney and Montgomery Ward. The Sears catalog was almost as important as the TV guide. It arrived thick and heavy, and children would spend hours circling toys they wanted for Christmas. Ordering something from the catalog and waiting weeks for it to arrive built anticipation that instant delivery has destroyed. 5 and dime stores still existed. Woolworths had lunch counters where families would sit on spinning stools and order grilled cheese sandwiches. Kids could buy candy by the piece, counting out pennies for bitter honey and bazooka gum. Fast food was still special, not every day. McDonald's was a treat. The playgrounds attached to restaurants were new and exciting. Birthday parties at McDonald's felt luxurious. The food tasted different then, cooked in ways that have long since changed. The 1970s had real challenges that children absorbed even if they did not fully understand. Vietnam ended with helicopters lifting off embassy roofs. Watergate played out on television, showing children that presidents could lie. Inflation meant parents worrying about money in ways kids could sense. Gas lines meant frustration and uncertainty, but somehow, childhood remained protected from most of it. The adult world and the child world were more separate than they would ever be again. Kids did not know about every tragedy happening everywhere. The news came once a day, not constantly. There was time to just be young. What defined growing up in 1970s America was a particular kind of innocence, not ignorance, but protection. The world had not yet shrunk into a screen that fits in a pocket. Community meant the people who lived on your street. Entertainment required effort and usually company. Boredom was allowed, and from boredom came creativity. The decade had its problems. The economy struggled. The country was divided. The future felt uncertain. But for children, summer lasted forever. Friends lived close enough to visit by bike. The neighborhood was a world complete in itself. And something about that combination of freedom and community created memories that glow brighter with every passing year. For those who lived it, the 1970s were not just a decade, they were a different world, one that feels further away than the years suggest. For those with memories of those long summer evenings and Saturday morning cartoons and the particular freedom of childhood before everything changed, there is always more history to explore.